let's talk about risk, governance, and compliance for the federal government, or GRC, governance, risk, and compliance for the federal governments of the United States. This includes state governments. This includes local governments that also use this same kind of thing. And also we're going to be talking about, of course, the federal government. That's all the departments, including all the military, the Department of Homeland Security, just about every organization within the federal government of the United States and the state government use what I'm about to show you right here. And that's why it's pretty lucrative if you're looking for a job in this space. And if you're interested in any part of this, I want you to know I have a complete course on this that breaks everything down. I've got free downloadables. If you like free stuff, there you go, free downloadables. I've got books on this that you can find on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble, on Apple. I've got tons and tons of content on this, so you can actually deep dive into everything I'm going to tell you right now. But I want to give you an overview of what it is so you can get an idea of why it's used, like a breakdown of like all of the stuff that goes into it, kind of give you like a bird's eye view of all this kind of stuff. And I'm going to do this in about 20 minutes. All right, so let's get into this. The first thing I want to do is give you a visual representation of what this thing is all about. So let me take you to what this thing looks like. I'm going to show you all the documents that you would normally use for this. And if you want to go much deeper into this, I'm going to show you all that. But let's start from the beginning. Let's start from a bird's eye view of what this thing actually is. So what you're looking at here, let me see if I can find a better one here. I'm going to show you like a wheel diagram that breaks down the entire process from a bird's eye view. This is actually a pretty good one right here, but it's a little outdated. So let me see if I can find a better one. Let me see. It's more. What I'm doing is looking through images. If you happen to be listening to me on a podcast, I'm looking for a pretty good image here that I can show, and I'll explain everything, so don't worry about it if you're actually listening here. Okay, so this wheel right here, you see this pretty often whenever somebody talks about NIST RMF. If you've actually been Googling this stuff or looking around, this right here is a breakdown of the entire process from a bird's eye view. Now, if you happen to be doing cybersecurity, GRC policy work, or information system security officer work, you'll rarely see it like this. You'll actually be inside of one of these processes, and so it won't look like this when you're actually doing it. But if you know the roadmap, you'll have an idea of where you are in the process. So let me start from in the middle here. This middle part right here is prepare. And in the prepare stage, we're talking about kind of educating everybody on the process. This is why it's really important for you as a policy person within the government to know this process as a whole, because sometimes you have to educate other people about it because they just don't know. This is not popular. It's not hacking. It's not investigations. It's not forensics. Just off those words alone, people have some idea of what it is. But a lot of people don't know this process, even when they're in the government, even when they're in the private sector who has to use this or whatever. They just don't understand what it is. So prepare stage is actually preparing the organization to go through this process. And very quickly, I can explain what it is. So whenever you have important assets, meaning important computers, important information, important people even, and you have to protect a mission or a business essential function, that means like things that we absolutely need to do the work that we're doing in our sector, whether we're the DMV and we're processing registrations for the state of Maine or whatever, or if maybe we are processing military logistics and making sure that the military people go where they're supposed to go and get the equipment they're supposed to get. So you need an actual database or a system to help you to do that. That's all very, very important information. It's going to have things like social security numbers, date of birth, place of birth. It's going to have people's real name, phone numbers, and addresses in it. So it's imperative. It's very important that we protect this information. So that's across the board, regardless of where you're at, you want your information protected. And so that's where this process comes in. The process is designed to walk an organization through all the things that they have to do to protect the information and the system and all the resources around it. So they need to protect things like the physical security of the system to make sure somebody can't just walk right into the facility, grab what they need and walk out, right? Physical security is super important. They also have to protect the access control. Even if we have employees who are allowed to come in the facility, we need to control who actually can touch that system or touch that data or see that data. Access control is what we use to do that. And then you have things like personnel security. Personnel security is like making sure that everybody is vetted and verified before they actually even get employed. It's things like firewalls, network security, protecting the actual systems, making sure the systems are hardened. That means like making sure that they're not just open. You just bought it from Dell and then you didn't secure the system. You don't have passwords or username or any of that stuff set up. You got to harden the system to make sure it does have multi-factor authentication, to make sure it has antivirus on it. There's a process that it takes place for every organization within the federal and the state governments to make sure that this happens properly. And so this process, the process of risk management, is done in a complete step-by-step fashion, so that from the time that you start the system, like when you're actually creating the system and you've actually conceived of the system, like it's only on paper. You haven't even put any system or bought anything yet to actually put it in place. Actually, in the very beginning, from the cradle of this system, you're already thinking about security. How will we secure it? What facility will we put it in? And then all the way till the end of life, where the system's already old. It was on Windows 95. Now it's time to get rid of that system. So from the cradle to the grave, this process is designed to protect your information, to protect the actual system from the very beginning to the very end. So it actually follows something called a system development lifecycle, which is what engineers use. There's different kinds of system development life cycles. We're not going to get into that, but there's different phases that a system has to go through when it's being developed, when it's being maintained, and when it's being decommissioned, or it's no longer around and we got to get rid of it. So that is what this system does. It's very, very important. So a lot of times, it's so important, as a matter of fact, is that many times when you hear about organizations getting hacked, 90% of them is because they don't have any kind of process like this. They're just kind of randomly doing stuff. This process makes sure that everybody's on the same page, because that's what it's designed to do. It's designed for the whole organization to take responsibility for security, and not just all these playing whack-a-mole. Like something happens, oh, there's a virus, there's a vulnerability, we better go fix it. And then they fix that system. Oh, there's one over here, let's go fix it. This is a process where you have a set time frame that you do something like vulnerability management. There's a set time frame that we're always going to scan and do assessments. There's a set time frame that we're going to continuously monitor the data, so everything's going like a finely tuned machine. That is what risk management framework is supposed to do for the government. Now, there's other types of risk management frameworks. There's other types of security frameworks. Ones for the healthcare system. There's ones for financial sector. There's ones for every sector has one, because as you get bigger, as your organization scales and gets larger, it makes more money or has more important data, they have to do this. Otherwise, it's a nightmare. And you could see it a lot of the hacks in the 90s, where little kids, 15-year-old kids, were hacking into databases because they weren't doing these processes effectively. And so that is what this whole thing is all about. In the prepare stage, it's on us, the cybersecurity people, to actually educate our organization to say, okay, we're starting this process, or, hey, we're in the middle of this process. I need this documentation from you. We need to have this meeting to make sure that this system has this or that control, or this or that baseline on it. Most of the work is continuously monitoring, but we'll get into that in a second. Let me first show you what we've got going on with our diagram here. So preparation is the centerpiece. You're always going to come back to that, because we're constantly working to gather information, educate people on what's going on. And sometimes it's just a matter of telling them what's going on, giving them context and saying, hey, I need this or that information. So preparation stage is really the first. It's like step 0 of this whole process. It's constantly ongoing. And that's kind of why they put it in the middle, because you're constantly preparing for each one of these steps in the phases. There's about 6 phases in total, 7 if you include preparation. Okay, so preparation comes first, and then you start off with this top one here. This top one right here is categorizing the system. So this really means security categorization. What security categorization? How do we classify this system? Is it a classified system? Is it a publicly available system? What is the impact to an organization if this system goes down? So you've got a low, moderate, or high type system. A low system, if I can give you a quick example, would be like a web server that has publicly available information. Yes, it's important that we keep it up, but if it goes down, what's the impact to the organization? There's an impact, but it's not that great. Like, it's okay if we get the system up in within a week, right? Because the data is not super important. It doesn't have any classified information. It doesn't have any important PII, personally identifiable information like social security numbers on it. So it's important, but it's not super important. Then you've got moderate level of security classification or categorization is like probably like a payment system. It's important. I mean, it's got pretty important information on it. If people don't get paid, they're going to lose their minds. It's got to be up probably within the next 24 hours or a day or two. But it's nobody's going to lose their life. Like, we can get the system up on time and everything. It's going to affect people's pay. Maybe it's going to delay their pay. That is a huge inconvenience, but we're going to get the system up. We're going to get people paid. We're going to fix this system. Then you've got the final, which is high. A high security categorized system is like classified systems. That's like whenever you hear, if there's data that's leaked that could literally get people killed. That is what when we talk about high, we're talking about loss of millions and millions of dollars, loss of life, loss of highly valuable assets, loss of an entire mission, loss of a whole company. Like, we're talking about catastrophic loss. We're not talking about serious loss, like the leaving the earnings statements is out, our payment system's down. That is serious, but we're talking about a catastrophic failure if we're talking about a high impact system. So that's security categorization. That's this one right here. And I don't know what in the world I just clicked. Okay, there we go. That's security categorization. Okay, so next one, once we have categorized the system, we're going to go to something called selecting the controls. And here's the thing. Once we know what the categorization is, now we can actually categorize the system. And I want to give you a quick visual idea of what that means. So right here, what I have on the screen is a breakdown of all the security control families. Now, the NIST 800 has literally like 1,000 controls. Like, if you count all of the security enhancements and all the controls together, is over 1,000. But you don't have to be intimidated by that, because one of the great things about it is you're going to tailor it. Not all controls apply to every system. So it's on us to actually figure out which controls. Well, we actually work with the team. We're not the final say-so on what happens as far as cybersecurity people. We're the people listen to. We're the subject matter experts on that, but we're not the people who make the final decision on that. That'll be the system owners that make the final decision on what controls, first of all, how it's classified, what is low, moderate, or high, but also what controls go on it. So let me give you an example. Once you know that it's a low impact system, see this right here? What I'm showing on the screen is a set of controls that are based on low, moderate, or high. This is how we know how to select the controls. If we know it's a low impact system that's a web server, we already have the controls right here. There's a baseline of controls. Now, there might be times when we have to add more, and that's part of tailoring. We're going to add more controls as needed. So this control family, this group of controls is much lower than your moderate and your high. Your high is going to have much more controls that are necessary. Let me get my screen back up there. Apologize for that. I don't know what happened. Okay, so it's going to have a lot more controls that are actually necessary, and that is what we're looking at here. Like, this is a low amount of systems controls. hold on, let me see. I just lost my screen here. Just give me a second, guys. I apologize for this. This is a live presentation, so I have to fix this real quick. Give me a second. Give me a second. Give me a second. All right, I have lost my screen. Give me a second here. I'm not sure what happened. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. On my side, everything just went blank, and I apologize. I think I just clicked the wrong thing. Okay, let me keep going here. All right, where was I? Okay, we were talking about selection of controls. So right now we've selected the low impact controls, and you can see all the controls that are dedicated to low right here, and there's much less controls than you have over here. When you have moderate impact and high, you've got all these control enhancements that happen. And so these controls, just to kind of give you a bird's eye view of what's going on. AC controls means access control. AT is actual training, awareness and training. AU is auditing or event logs, making sure the systems are collecting event logs. CA controls are control assessment. CM is control management. CP controls are contingency planning. Somebody asked me one time, if there's 1,000 controls, do I need to know all of these? No. So you need to kind of know the families. Like, it's a good idea to actually understand what's going on with the families as a security person. But you don't need to know every single one, because these things actually change from time to time. You got to have a good enough understanding to interpret them, because sometimes when you get into these documents, it's a little bit confusing. But let me get back on track and just go through some of these other ones. So we've categorized, we've selected controls, and now we want to implement controls. Implementation, once we know what controls we need, now we're going to implement those controls. And implementation gets into actually installing controls. And so there's a couple of references. Normally what you do is go to the actual vendor. The vendor is going to be one of the best places to go to when you're talking about applying the controls. So that's implementation of the controls. Let me just get this one's not as blurry, so let's stick with this one. And then you've got step 4, which is actually, this will be step 5 if you're talking about, if you're integrating the preparation stage. But step 4 is the assessment of those implemented controls. So you've implemented the controls, now you have to assess them. And there's a couple things with assessments. So with assessments, there's a couple things you can do. One is you're going to actually do a self-assessment. A self-assessment is where you, within the same organization, you're going to look at all of your controls, all of your paperwork, conduct scans, evaluate those scans, collect that information, and then show your upper level management. And then you've got independent, third-party independent assessments. And these are the most important ones, because at some point the organization has to do this by federal law. It's supposed to happen with every federal system organization. So, and the reason why is because these are objective. They're objective and they're independent. So that means the organization has to be impartial to what's going on. It's another organization coming in, looking at your system, running your scan, and looking at it, and then doing the report, because then there's no bias. And then after that's done, after that assessment's done, if this is the first time the system has come online, at some point it has to be authorized. And that means your upper level management, that's normally a CIO or a CISO department, or it could be what's called an authorizing authority or an authorizing officer. We used to call it a DAA, or a designated authorizing authority. Anybody, it's the person in charge, the head of the agency, or a representative or a representative office. They're going to take on the risk by signing off and saying, yep, this is good. This is what we need to do. I accept all the risk for this system. And then it goes forward. And the last step 7, step 6, step 7, if we're talking about adding the preparation stage, and step 6, if we're talking about just the original step 6, and maybe step 0 is the preparation. Then step 6 is monitoring the controls. So you've done all this stuff on the system. You've had it have a risk assessment, and the assessment is at a certain level of security. It's been authorized by the upper level management. And now the final step is the one that we are most familiar, that happens the most often, 99% of the time that's happening, is the monitoring step. So monitoring is looking at all the control. It's not just scanning. Okay. So that's one misconception, is that you're scanning and that's monitoring. No, that's one part of it. So it's also a set continuous assessments. Assessments are not just scanning. It's looking at the documentation, making sure that the documents are up to date, making sure that they're accurate, because systems are constantly changing all the time, making sure that the users are being educated, making sure that the physical security is up to par. Like, it has to, if something changed, or if there was, maybe they had some reconstruction, they had a new building that's on the other side of the campus, making sure that's included in the physical controls, the physical security of the whole area. Like, monitoring is looking at all the changes. Another thing is it's change management. Like, anytime something happens, or if there's a patch that happens with the system, or if we have to upgrade the system, or it changes operating systems altogether, monitoring is going to the meetings, that's making sure that these changes are not going to negatively affect the actual system security. So that is all of the stuff that goes into, from a bird's eye view, what you need to know about GRC. These things come into play quite often, particularly monitoring. This is what you see most often, but selection of controls, implementation of controls, assessments, all of these things are coming up all the time. And this is how we as an organization are all collectively involved in the process. It's not just you playing whack-a-mole to fix this or fix that. It's everybody is on the same team to get cybersecurity, making sure it's effective. And when it's not, that's when you have a bunch of weak links that people are getting into the network, data's getting leaked, or there's a breach on the network. That's when that stuff happens, when they don't have good security framework set up. They're not setting it up. They might have it on paper, but they're not actually implementing it. That's when you see really bad breaches, when they're not actually implementing it. Mark my words. So let me show you, if you're actually interested in going a little bit deeper in this, let me kind of show you, give you a bird's eye view of what you need to look at. First of all, like I said, there's some free downloadable templates. If they happen to have made you a ISO, an Information System Security Officer, or a GRC, you're actually going into GRC. Maybe you just want to take a look at it. If you happen to be a GRC person getting into this, there's some downloadables. It's really, this stuff right here is just going to give you an idea of what the kind of documents you can use. Now, you can use them if you have to for your own templates, but most organizations are going to have their own templates, their own way of doing things. But this will give you an idea to say, okay, here's what we're doing. Here, what are other organizations doing? So that is what that is. And if you want to actually have a complete breakdown that's way more in depth than what I just said, sign up for this course right here, and take a look at it. It's got some pretty good reviews over the years. People have really liked it because I just break everything down very, very thoroughly. This is not for the faint of heart. This is literally hours and hours and hours of training that you could go through, but it's going to walk you through all the aspects of including preparation, by the way. It's just a lot of videos. Okay. Now here's another thing you can do is you can read these. I'm gonna give you about 3 or 4 publications you can check out, resources. The number one, everything I just talked about in greater detail is in this document here called the NIST 837 Rev 2. And this is the risk management framework for information systems and organizations. And it's just a life cycle approach to security and privacy. Okay. So it is going to walk you through everything I just said, but go in much greater detail about what I just said. It's walking through you through the entire process. Another document to check out, so he has prepare categorize, selection of controls, implement. It's going to tell you actually how to do it. Another document to check out is this one, FIPS 199, which is it's used for security categorization of federal information systems. And this is like an 8-page document. This is not long at all. Like the actual doc part of it that you need to read is like, it's only like 8 pages long. So it talks about the stuff I was talking about as far as the differences between how do you determine whether it's a high, a moderate, or a low. It's all based on the actual information. And this one ties into another document called the NIST 860 Volume 2. And that has examples of the types of information that you would classify to make sure to figure out if it's a moderate, a low, or a high. And that is done really by the organization, but it's important to know for us as GRC people. Another document to check out is the minimum security requirements for federal information systems, or FIPS 200. Again, this is like I don't know, it's a 5-page document or something. It's worth your time to just check it out, read through it. And it's just basically telling you the stuff I just said, which is the impact levels, and it ties into figuring out what the security of the actual information systems are to figure out what the impact levels are. So 199, FIPS 199 and FIPS 200 kind of go hand in hand for the categorization of the system, the categorization and the selection of controls. Another big one is going to be, and I don't have it pulled up here, but NIST 853. And that actually has a breakdown of all the controls. Let me see if I can. Yeah, so it's this right here. Essentially, they made like a website here. So I'm looking at the actual NIST 800, NIST.gov site, and that has all the controls on it. And I really like this reference. It's really good for teaching. But whenever I have to actually do work, I have to pull up the actual document. The document is a NIST 853. And then for assessments, is NIST 853A. Now, if you happen to be taking the CGRC, which is a breakdown of everything I just said, everything I just taught in this 25-minute, 30-minute session is in that CGRC. They go a lot deeper into this, of course. ISC2 squared, certified in governance, risk, and compliance certification. It goes into the documents that I just said. It doesn't go into the actual controls. It doesn't go into the actual control families. It's more about the process. So you're going to see NIST 837, NIST 830 and 39. You're going to see a little bit about NIST 860, Volume 1 and 2. You'll see a little bit FIPS 199, FIPS 200. Those are the ones, the structural stuff is what you're going to see. They're not going to break down, well, okay, what is AC19? What is AT-4? No, they're not going to do all that with the security controls. But that's it, guys. I just wanted to give you guys a bird's eye view. It's been a while since I actually broke this down, so I figured I'd just go ahead and do it on one of these lives. And I will see you guys on the next one. I'm going to be doing a lot more of these lives, so I'll talk